Hi children, this is Chandrasekhar, Zoology faculty from Sri Chaitanya. In Sri Chaitanya's NEET Sankalp 2.0 program, the next chapter regarding the zoology I am going to discuss is the breathing and exchange of gases. So regarding this chapter, let me give you some introductory points. See, after the ingestion of a food, the food will be digested. The macromolecules of food will be digested into simple and absorbable molecules like glucose, amino acids, fatty acids. Once these components are produced, finally they will be absorbed into the body cells. So what is the fate of these components once they get into the body cells? Here the term respiration will come into the picture. So we will take oxygen into the cells. Here the oxygen is used or utilized to indirectly break down the amino acids, fatty acids and glucose to derive energy. And why do we require energy? To perform different metabolic activities. But what happens in this process? When oxygen is utilized to break down the glucose, it will produce carbon dioxide and water along with the 36 ATP molecules. As the CO2 is produced, CO2 is harmful to the body. As we are taking oxygen continuously into the body, we have to send out this carbon dioxide produced during this activity. As this activity is happening in a term called breakdown, you can call it as catabolic activity. So this continuous exchange of O2 from atmosphere into the body and CO2 produced in the body into the atmosphere is known as breathing, which is also called respiration. The first topic under this particular chapter is respiratory organs. See, before getting into the respiratory organs, one point I want to tell you, like the mechanism of breathing is not same in all the groups of animals. It varies depending on the type of habitats they are present, depending on the level of organization present in those animals. For example, if you take lower invertebrates like sponges, coelenterate, flatworms, they respire through body surface by a process called diffusion. The next flatworms belongs to the platyhelminthes. When it comes to the Annelida, the earthworms respire through moist cuticle. And when it comes to arthropoda, the aquatic arthropods like crustaceans, prawns and crabs, they respire through gills. Terrestrial arthropods like insects respire through trachea. Scorpion respire through book lungs. And next to arthropoda, the next one is mollusca. Mollusks possess feather-like gills in their mantle cavity. So the mode of respiration, the organs involved in the respiration of mollusks are gills. The respiration performed with the help of gills is called branchial respiration. Let's talk about higher organisms. When it comes to the chordates, urochordates, cephalochordates, they respire through gills. Pisces respire through gills. But amphibians, they respire through gills, skin, buccopharyngeal cavity and lungs. The higher vertebrates like reptiles, aves and mammals, in all these three groups, irrespective of the habitat, they respire only through the lungs. The mode of respiration happening through the lungs is called pulmonary respiration. If the respiration takes place through the skin, that is called cutaneous respiration. So this is regarding respiratory organs in different organisms and groups related to the kingdom Animalia. So the next topic is human respiratory system. Regarding the human respiratory system starts with the parts called external nostrils. A pair of external nostrils present in humans, they opens into nasal passages. Nasal passages opens into nasal chambers. And the nasal chamber opens into the pharynx through internal nostrils. Pharynx opens into trachea. That means after the pharynx, there is larynx. The opening of pharynx into the larynx is guarded by a cartilaginous flap known as epiglottis. That opening is called glottis, and epiglottis closes the glottis at the time of swallowing of a food. And I can say The food that we ingest will go from buccal cavity to pharynx. The air we are taking is also getting into the pharynx. Hence, a portion of pharynx acts as common passage for food and air. And which part of the pharynx acts as common passage? Pharynx is divided into 3 portions. See, suppose if it is the pharynx, it can be divided into the first part called nasopharynx, second part called oropharynx, third part known as laryngopharynx. First air will enter into the naso, from there it will go to the oro. The food that we ingest also will reach the oro. From oro onwards, food and air get mixed. Hence, oropharynx and laryngopharynx are the common passage for food and air. It's not like entire pharynx, a part of the pharynx is the common passage. And the pharynx opens into larynx. Larynx is called voice box. Our larynx is made up of cartilages. Inside the larynx, we have a pair of vocal cords. They are involved in the production of sound. Of course, larynx is also allowing the passage of air, and larynx opens into trachea. See this is the trachea. This is the larynx opens into trachea. Trachea is known as windpipe. Trachea internally lined by pseudostratified ciliated epithelium, and it is also having C-shaped cartilaginous rings to prevent the lapse of trachea when the air is absent. And trachea passes through the neck, gets into the thorax, exactly in the mid region of the thorax, in the middle line of the thorax ventrally, it will be divided into a pair of bronchi. At which vertebra it will be divided into bronchi? At 5th thoracic vertebra, or else if you want to say at which vertebra, above the 5 thoracic vertebrae there are 7 cervical, 7 plus 5. At 12th vertebra, the trachea is divided into a pair of primary bronchi. And each primary bronchus enter the lungs. It's not trachea, guys. Primary bronchus enter the lungs. Once the primary bronchi enter the lungs, it will be further divided into secondary bronchi, then tertiary bronchi. Bronchi further divided into primary bronchiole, secondary bronchiole, tertiary bronchioles, terminal bronchioles, respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts, finally alveolar sacs and alveoli. So, inside the lungs, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli are there. So, bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli comprise the lungs. It's not trachea. Trachea will not enter the lung, bronchi will enter the lung. And about the other components of these parts, from trachea onwards there are cartilaginous rings. These rings are there in the trachea, these rings are there in all the 3 types of bronchi and also present in the initial bronchioles. So, up to initial bronchioles there are C-shaped cartilaginous rings present. And trachea bronchi are lined by the pseudostratified ciliated epithelium. Bronchioles in general are lined by columnar ciliated epithelium, and these are having goblet cells. They secrete mucus. And this mucus can able to trap foreign components like dust and other components. Starting from external nostrils till this tertiary bronchioles, terminal bronchioles, we can call it as a conducting part. So, what are the parts that are there in the conducting part? Nostrils, nasal passage, nasal chamber, pharynx, larynx, trachea, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, primary bronchiole, secondary bronchiole, tertiary bronchiole and terminal bronchiole. Till terminal bronchioles it is called conducting part. And what are the functions of conducting part? Conducting part is involved in the transportation of air, it humidifies the air, filters the dust present in the air and also adjusts the temperature of the air to the body temperature, and it is not the site of exchange of gases. And what is the part after the conducting? The next part is called respiratory part. The respiratory part consists of respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts and alveoli, and it is the principal site of exchange of gases. It is the principal site of exchange of gases. So, the functions of conducting part, functions of a respiratory part. Next, when it comes to the structure of lungs, a pair of lungs present in humans in thoracic chamber. Thoracic chamber, it is a airtight chamber. It has boundaries like ventrally it has sternum, dorsally it has thoracic vertebrae, laterally ribs and posteriorly it has diaphragm. And these are the borders of thoracic chamber. inside the thoracic chamber we have a pair of lungs, right lung and left lung. Each lung is protected by a pair of membranes called pleura. Between pleura there is pleural fluid. The pleural fluid prevents the friction, and it acts as a shock absorber, prevents mechanical stress. And inside the lungs there are lobes, and these lungs are having many alveoli. Human lungs consist of nearly 300 million alveoli. These 300 million alveoli provide the surface area for the exchange of gases, nearly that is equal to 70 to 100 meter square surface area. So, human lungs possess 300 million alveoli. So, this is regarding the structure of lungs. As thoracic chamber is airtight chamber, as the lungs are present inside the thoracic chamber, we cannot directly alter the volume of lungs. But how can you alter? We can able to change the lung volume by making the changes in the thoracic volume. So, any change in the thoracic volume will be reflected in the lung volume. So, this is regarding the human respiratory system, the parts starting from external nostrils till alveoli, conducting part, respiratory part, basic structure of lungs, alveoli, surface area. Now, let us talk about events involved in respiration. There are 5 important events that are involved in respiration. The first one is called pulmonary ventilation. Pulmonary ventilation means intake of oxygen, air into the lungs, exit of air from lungs to the atmosphere. Let us take one-way direction first. Regarding the one-way direction, first we will take atmospheric air into the lungs. So, this is called first step, ventilation. From lungs, the air will go to the blood capillaries. That is called second step, known as external respiration. Nothing but it is a pulmonary exchange of gases, which occur by a method called diffusion. Then the blood will transport the oxygen. From blood, if oxygen enter the tissues or body cells, that is called internal respiration, that is step 4. Internal respiration also occur by diffusion. Once the oxygen enter the cell, that oxygen will act on glucose, breaks the glucose into carbon dioxide, water, and produce nearly 36 ATP molecules. By using this ATP, the cells can able to manage their metabolisms. This is the final step. Final step is called cellular respiration, which is a catabolic process, and in this process only we can able to derive the energy required for the metabolisms of different cells. 5 steps: pulmonary ventilation, followed by external respiration, followed by transport of air, followed by internal respiration, and followed by cellular respiration. These are the events of respiration. Next topic is mechanism of respiration. The mechanism of respiration is it is having 2 stages, inspiration and expiration. But before getting into the mechanism of inspiration and expiration, let me give you one important point. The mechanism of breathing mainly occurs based on the pressure gradient. The pressure differences in the lungs and in the atmosphere. In the lungs and in the atmosphere. And this pressure gradient is caused by different muscles like intercostal muscles and diaphragm muscles. There are intercostal muscles, they are present between the ribs like internal intercostal and external intercostal, and the muscles present in the diaphragm are called phrenic muscles. Their contractions, relaxations are involved in creating the pressure gradients required for the mechanism of breathing like inspiration and expiration. First step that is inspiration. The inspiration is an active process because it is caused by the contraction of muscles. The inspiration is initiated by the contraction of muscles of diaphragm. When muscles of diaphragm contracts, the dome shaped diaphragm become flat. When dome shaped diaphragm become flat, the thoracic volume will be increased in anterior posterior axis, which is also called vertical axis, followed by the contraction of external intercostal muscles. When external intercostal muscles undergo contraction, our ribs and sternum move forward and upward. That means the volume will be increased from back side to the front side. We can call it as a dorsoventral axis, which is clearly given in NCERT textbook. So, due to the diaphragm contraction and due to the external intercostal muscle contraction, overall the thoracic volume is increasing. When thoracic volume increases, that increases the pulmonary volume. When pulmonary volume is increased, pulmonary volume is also called intrapulmonary volume. When it is increased, that decreases the intrapulmonary pressure, and intrapulmonary pressure will be decreased. How much is the atmospheric pressure? That is 760 mm of Hg. How much is the intrapulmonary pressure? That will become 758. So, there is less pressure inside compared to the atmosphere. That will cause drawing of air from atmosphere into the alveoli by a process called inspiration. See, this is the diagram. Diaphragm coming down, see the ribs and sternum moving forward and upward. Overall volume increases, pressure decreases, causing the drawing of air. The second step in the mechanism of respiration is expiration. It is a passive process. Normal expiration is a passive process. It is caused by the relaxation of muscles. The relaxation of diaphragm, it will cause that flat diaphragm to go back to its dome shape, so that the volume of thoracic chamber decreases in vertical axis. Followed by relaxation of external intercostal muscles. When external intercostal muscles undergo relaxation, the ribs and sternum which have moved forward and upward, they go to their original position. So, when they go back, that will decrease the thoracic volume in dorsoventral axis. When thoracic volume is decreased, that also decreases the pulmonary volume. When pulmonary volume decreases, that increases the intrapulmonary pressure. Atmospheric pressure is 760. When pulmonary volume is decreased, increases the intrapulmonary pressure to 762 approximately, so that inside more pressure, outside less pressure. That causes a movement of air from lungs to the atmosphere, saying a process called expiration. And we have the ability to increase the strength of the respiration by using the additional muscles of abdomen. With the help of additional muscles of abdomen, we can cause force inspiration and force expiration. So, the force expiration is an active process. Normal expiration is by relaxation, but force expiration is caused by the contraction of additional muscles of abdomen. Hence, forced expiration is said to be active process. And whatever the volumes of air we are inhaling and exhaling, it can be calculated by using a method called spirometry. And let us discuss the volumes and capacities of lungs in the next topic. See, respiratory volumes and capacities. The first one is tidal volume. The tidal volume, it is the volume of air inspired or expired by quiet breathing, normal breathing. How much amount of air we inspire or expire by quiet breathing? It is approximately 500 ml. This one. And how many times will perform that per minute? 12 to 16 times. A healthy person can breathe 12 to 16 times per minute. So, every time 500 ml taking in, or like 12 into 500 ml or 16 into 500 ml, that is approximately 6000 to 8000 ml of tidal volume is there in a healthy person per minute. The next volume is inspiratory reserve volume. It is the volume of air inspired by forced inspiration, not by normal inspiration. Whatever the amount of air we take by forced inspiration, that is called inspiratory reserve volume. Inspiratory reserve volume is equal to 2500 to 3000 ml. Followed by the expiratory reserve volume. It is the volume of air expired by forced expiration, not by normal expiration. By normal expiration, we can able to send 500 ml out, but by forced expiration, we can able to send some extra amount of air out, that is equal to 1000 to 1100 ml. So, this is regarding the tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume and expiratory reserve volume. Let us talk about residual volume. See, while we are performing the normal expiration and inspiration, we will take tidal volume in and tidal volume out. So, we will send extra volume of air out when you perform forcible expiration only, otherwise that forcible expiration amount present inside the lungs only. Generally, we do not send forcible expiration amount out, we will send TV in and TV out, that is it. But when it comes to the residual volume, it is the volume of air remaining in the lung after sending a normal tidal volume followed by ERV out. So, volume of air remaining in the lung even after forcible expiration is called residual volume, and this is equal to 1100 to 1200 ml, and this is the volume that will not let the lungs to get collapse. Let us talk about capacities, guys. So, the first one is the inspiratory capacity. Inspiratory capacity is the total volume of air inspired after normal expiration. That means, see this, R after normal expiration, TV out. If you want to take the total amount of air in, that is tidal volume followed by inspiratory reserve volume. TV plus IRV is equal to inspiratory capacity. What is expiratory capacity? This is the total volume of air expired after normal inspiration. When you take TV in, we have to send the TV out followed by forcible expiration, that is ERV out. So, TV plus ERV is equal to expiratory capacity. The expiratory capacity is the total volume of air expired after normal inspiration. Next is a functional residual capacity. What is functional residual capacity? I already told you, while you are performing normal expiration, inspiration, in your lung who are already present TV and ERV and RV. Functional residual volume means volume of air remaining in the lung only after normal expiration. When you perform normal expiration, you will send the TV out. Then what is going to remain in the lung? ERV plus RV. The volume of air remaining in the lung after normal expiration is called functional residual capacity, that is equal to ERV plus RV. Next one is vital capacity, very, very important. What is vital capacity? See this. What is vital capacity? Vital capacity is nothing but, see, I already told you RV is already present in the lung, ERV is also present while performing normal breathing. Vital capacity means maximum volume of air inspired after forcible expiration. See, a person performed forcible expiration, that means he has sent the ERV out. Then we are asking the person to perform the maximum inspiration. First of all, the person need to take this ERV back, followed by TV, followed by IRV. So, maximum volume of air inspired after forcible expiration is known as a vital capacity. That includes TV plus IRV plus ERV. This is one definition of vital capacity. The second definition of vital capacity is maximum volume of air expired after forcible inspiration. Generally, we perform TV in, TV out. We don't take IRV in unless and until you perform the forcible inspiration. Otherwise, IRV will not come into the lung. Suppose if you ask, see, what is already there in the lung? RV there, ERV there. Now we are asking the person to perform forcible inspiration followed by normal inspiration. By normal inspiration TV, by forcible inspiration IRV the person can take. After taking the forcible inspiration, if you ask the person to expire maximum, first the person need to send that IRV out, followed by TV out, followed by ERV out, again TV plus IRV plus ERV, that is also vital capacity. So, maximum volume of air inspired after forcible expiration is vital capacity. Maximum volume of air expired after forcible inspiration is also called vital capacity. And the last one is total lung capacity. It is the total volume of air accommodated in your lung at the end of forcible inspiration. See, at the end of forcible inspiration means initially we will take TV followed by IRV. Then at the end of IRV, whatever is there in your lung, all those volumes put together known as total lung capacity. That includes TV plus IRV plus ERV plus RV. Let me give you the values of all these volumes and capacities at a glance. Tidal volume is 500 ml. Inspiratory reserve volume is 2500 to 3000 ml. Expiratory reserve volume is 1000 to 1100 ml. Residual volume is 1100 to 1200 ml. When it comes to the capacities, guys, inspiratory capacity TV plus IRV is equal to 3000 to 3500 ml. Expiratory capacity TV plus ERV is equal to 1500 to 1600 ml. Functional residual capacity ERV plus RV is equal to 2100 to 2300 ml. Vital capacity is around 4000 to 4600 ml. Total lung capacity is approximately 5100 to 6000 ml. So, these are the values of the volumes and capacities, and this is a important topic in which they are asking the questions in NEET very frequently. So, after volumes and capacities, let us talk about the next topic, exchange of gases. Exchange of gases can occur at two places, between alveoli and blood capillaries, between blood capillaries and tissues. The upper one is called a pulmonary exchange and the lower one is called systemic exchange. Pulmonary exchange and systemic exchange, and this exchange can occur by diffusion. And exchange of gases depends on important factors like exchange of gases mainly depends on partial pressure of the gas. What is partial pressure of a gas? The pressure exerted by an individual gas in a mixture. For example, total atmospheric air pressure is 760 mm of Hg. What is the partial pressure of oxygen in that total atmospheric pressure? That is equal to 159 mm of Hg, that is called PO2, partial pressure of oxygen. What will be the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the atmospheric pressure? Actually, atmospheric pressure is 760 mm of Hg. In that, how much contribution of partial pressure is there from carbon dioxide? It is around 0.3 mm of Hg. So, it depends on partial pressure, exchange of gases. The second factor influencing the exchange of gases is solubility of the gases, and the third factor is thickness of the respiratory membrane. What is respiratory membrane? See, this is the diffusion membrane. Diffusion membrane includes the simple squamous epithelium of alveolus, basement membrane and endothelium of blood capillary. All these three components put together forming diffusion membrane. Diffusion membrane is thin, its thickness is less than 1 mm. Then only it can allow the easy exchange of gases. So, the three factors that influences the exchange of gases includes the first main factor is partial pressure, followed by solubility and thickness of the membrane. We can also call it as diffusion distance. And what is the exchange of gases process here? Let me tell you. So, regarding the exchange of gases process, see, atmospheric air will be taken into the alveoli by tidal volume. Once the air enter into the alveolar air partial pressures, if you observe, the oxygen partial pressure is around 104 mm of Hg and partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 40 mm of Hg in the alveoli. And the blood that is reaching the alveolar capillaries is deoxygenated blood. What are the partial pressures of carbon dioxide and oxygen in the air that is reaching the alveolar capillaries? That is 45 mm of Hg of PCO2, 40 mm of Hg of PO2. Here the 45 mm of Hg of PCO2 is there, but the PCO2 in the alveoli is 40. So, higher pressure to lower pressure, the CO2 will move from pulmonary capillaries to the alveoli. But oxygen partial pressure in the alveoli is 104, whereas in this blood is 40. So, that oxygen move from alveoli to pulmonary capillaries. This is the exchange of gases at pulmonary capillaries. Once the oxygen enter the pulmonary capillaries, carbon dioxide is leaving. From this point onwards, you can call it as oxygenated blood. What are the partial pressures of carbon dioxide and oxygen in the oxygenated blood? Oxygen partial pressure is 95 mm of Hg and carbon dioxide partial pressure is 40 mm of Hg. Now, this oxygenated blood through the pulmonary veins will go to the left atrium. From left atrium, it will be released into the left ventricle. Left ventricle will pump this oxygenated blood to the body parts with the help of systemic aorta and respective arteries. Let us talk about systemic arteries. Systemic arteries are having oxygenated blood, partial pressures 95 mm of Hg and 40 mm of Hg respectively to the oxygen and carbon dioxide. Once the blood reaches the systemic capillaries, let us compare these partial pressures with the partial pressure of gases in the tissues, guys. In the tissues, carbon dioxide partial pressure is 45, oxygen partial pressure is 40, but in the blood, the oxygen partial pressure is 95, so that oxygen can move from blood to the tissues. Carbon dioxide partial pressure in the tissues is 45, whereas in the blood it is 40, so the carbon dioxide move from tissues to the blood capillaries. Once this exchange occurs, from this point onwards, you can call this blood as deoxygenated blood. In the deoxygenated blood passes through the systemic veins, that is nothing but vena cava, into the right atrium, then into the right ventricle. From there it will be pumped to the lungs with the help of pulmonary arteries. They are all having deoxygenated blood with the same partial pressures like PO2 40 mm of Hg and PCO2 45 mm of Hg. Okay, fine. Suppose if left ventricle pumped 100 ml of oxygenated blood to the tissues, that 100 ml of oxygenated blood can deliver how much amount of oxygen to the tissues? That is approximately 5 ml of O2. The 100 ml of deoxygenated blood that is reaching the pulmonary capillaries can deliver how much amount of CO2 to alveoli? That is 4 ml of carbon dioxide will be released. Next, once the oxygen enter into the pulmonary capillaries, now the oxygen may react with the hemoglobin and forms oxyhemoglobin. That means the site of oxyhemoglobin formation is pulmonary capillaries. Once the oxyhemoglobin reaches the systemic capillaries, it will be dissociated here and releasing oxygen to the tissues. So that means site of dissociation of oxyhemoglobin is nothing but at tissues, systemic capillaries. So this is regarding exchange of gases, but one more important point I want to tell you here. The solubility of carbon dioxide is nearly 20 to 25 times more compared to the solubility of oxygen in the blood. So the more solubility of carbon dioxide will give the carbon dioxide more diffusion capacity. So the diffusion capacity of carbon dioxide is more compared to the oxygen because its solubility is nearly 20 to 25 times more than oxygen. With this exchange of gases topic completed. The next one is transport of gases. Regarding the transport of gases, you already know that oxygen will be transported from the lungs to the tissues, carbon dioxide will be transported from tissues to the lungs. Let us talk about oxygen transport first. The oxygen will be transported in two major forms, one is dissolved form and second one is oxyhemoglobin form. See this, nearly 3% of the oxygen will be dissolved in plasma and transported in dissolved state. 97% of the oxygen is transported by RBC with the help of hemoglobin as oxyhemoglobin. See what happens in RBC with respect to the oxygen transport. Oxygen reacts with hemoglobin, actually 4 oxygen molecules maximum reacts with hemoglobin. It can form HbO2 taken 4 and it is a reversible reaction. O2 plus Hb forming HbO2 oxyhemoglobin, it occurs at the pulmonary capillaries, and once it reaches the systemic capillaries, HbO2 is broken down to Hb and O2 and O2 will be released to tissues. It is a reversible reaction. So where is this oxyhemoglobin is formed? At the pulmonary capillaries. And what are the factors that favor the formation of oxyhemoglobin? The factors that favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin includes primarily it depends on the partial pressure of oxygen and partial pressure of oxygen should be high. And it also depends on other components like low partial pressure of carbon dioxide, low temperature, low H plus and slightly high pH. These are the factors that can influence us and that favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin at pulmonary capillaries. But once oxyhemoglobin reaches this tissues area, now the oxyhemoglobin should dissociate. That means which factors at the tissues can favor the dissociation of oxyhemoglobin? It is, see guys, very important point, oxygen is playing an important role, partial pressure of oxygen playing an important role in the binding of oxygen with the hemoglobin. The partial pressure of oxygen also plays an important role in the dissociation of oxyhemoglobin. That means binding of carbon dioxide with the hemoglobin is also influenced by an important factor called partial pressure of oxygen. So what are the factors that favors the dissociation of oxyhemoglobin at tissues? It is high partial pressure of carbon dioxide, low partial pressure of oxygen, high temperature, high H plus and low pH. These factors can favor the dissociation of oxyhemoglobin at tissues. That is the reason why the oxygen will be delivered to the tissues. And when we see the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, so this is the standard oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. In the standard oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, partial pressure of oxygen is taken on the x-axis and percentage saturation of hemoglobin is taken on the y-axis. And the shape of the curve is sigmoid. Just 2 or 3 standard values I will give you from this graph, you just remember those. In oxy blood, the partial pressure of oxygen is 95 mm of Hg and the saturation of hemoglobin in the oxygenated blood under normal conditions in a healthy person is around 97%. Second one, in the deoxygenated blood, the partial pressure of oxygen is 40 mm of Hg under normal conditions, and in the deoxygenated blood, the percentage of hemoglobin saturated is around 75%. That means though oxygen, carbon dioxide both are there in the blood, but the affinity of oxygen towards hemoglobin is always high compared to the carbon dioxide. That is the reason why in the oxy blood the percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen is 97. Even in the deoxy blood, though CO2 is more, the saturation of hemoglobin by oxygen is more, that is around 75%. So, sigmoid shape, these points are enough regarding this particular graph. Let us talk about transport of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is transported in three forms, three major forms. One is dissolved state. Let me give you the dissolved state. CO2 reacts with water present in the plasma in a reversible reaction, forming H2CO3, carbonic acid, with the help of carbonic anhydrase. Where is this carbonic acid formed? At the tissue site. Where is this carbonic acid is broken down to H2O, CO2 and CO2 will be sent out at the lungs site. This is dissolved state. Around 7% of carbon dioxide is transported by plasma in dissolved state. Next, approximately 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide will be transported by hemoglobin of RBC, See, that is also a reversible reaction, guys. CO2 reacts with hemoglobin and form carbaminohemoglobin. This is also a reversible reaction. The CO2 reacts with hemoglobin and forming carbaminohemoglobin at the tissue site, and it will be dissociated to form carbon dioxide and hemoglobin, and carbon dioxide will be sent out through the diffusion membrane. So, how much percentage of carbon dioxide is transported as carbaminohemoglobin? It is 20 to 25%, on an average 23%. And when we come to the final form, bicarbonate form, listen carefully. Regarding the bicarbonate form, listen carefully, 70% of carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonate form. 70%. See guys, listen carefully. When CO2 enter the blood from tissues into the blood of systemic capillaries, the CO2 will get into the RBC. It will not stay in the plasma, it will get into the RBC and reacts with CO2 reacts with water present in the RBC and forming a carbonic acid with the help of carbonic anhydrase. But how much percentage? Nearly 70, and that will be dissociated to hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions, H plus and HCO3 minus. This forward reaction takes place at the tissue site, but this reaction is happening inside the RBC. Once the bicarbonates are formed in the RBC at the tissue site, these bicarbonates from RBC will go to the plasma. From plasma, chloride ions will get into the RBC. This process is called chloride shift. And major amount of bicarbonate is transported by the plasma in the form of sodium bicarbonate. Major bicarbonate, out of 70% bicarbonate, major amount of bicarbonate is transported by the plasma. Now this total setup from the systemic capillaries, it will go to the vena cava, systemic veins, from there to right atrium, right ventricle, from there to pulmonary arteries, and then finally into the pulmonary capillaries. Once this blood gets into the pulmonary capillaries, the reaction will be reversed. HCO3 minus, backward reaction at the pulmonary capillaries. HCO3 minus reacts with H plus and forming H2CO3. H2CO3 will be broken down to H2O and CO2. CO2 will be sent out from pulmonary capillaries to alveoli, alveoli to out. This is backward reaction. The backward reaction is occurring at systemic capillaries. So, this is the transport of carbon dioxide as bicarbonate ions around 70%. Major bicarbonate transportation occurs by plasma in the form of sodium bicarbonate. This is the schematic representation of exchange of gases in blood. O2 transported by plasma that is 3%, 97% of O2 is transported by RBC as oxyhemoglobin. When it comes to the carbon dioxide, 7% of CO2 is transported by plasma in dissolved state, 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide is transported by hemoglobin, that means RBC as carbaminohemoglobin form, 70% bicarbonate both by RBC and plasma, but major amount by plasma. Here when we talk about carbonic anhydrase story, carbonic anhydrase is there both in plasma and RBC, but the carbonic anhydrase present in the RBC is highly concentrated compared to the plasma. It is present in both. Next, let us talk about regulation of respiration. Regarding the regulation of respiration, human beings have a significant ability to maintain and moderate the respiratory rhythm to suit to the demands of the body. Yes, we can able to maintain and moderate. Whenever it is required, we can increase the breathing rate and we can decrease the breathing rate to the normal when we are in normal physiological state. And what are the components that helps in this regulation? There are some centers to regulate the respiration in human beings. Like there are neural centers, there are peripheral centers. Let us talk about some neural centers, important neural centers that are involved in the regulation of breathing. First one is called respiratory rhythmic center, also called medullary rhythmic center, because in hindbrain it is located in the medulla oblongata. This is RRC, respiratory rhythmic center. It is present in the medulla oblongata. It is primarily responsible for the regulation of our breathing, both normal breathing and forced breathing. It is the main center. It has different respiratory groups to regulate normal breathing and forced breathing. The next center is pneumotaxic center, PTC, pneumotaxic center. Where is it located? It is located in the pons region of our brain, pneumotaxic center. It is present in the pons. So what are the functions of pneumotaxic center? One function of pneumotaxic center is it can moderate the functions of respiratory rhythmic center. It can moderate. The second function is, depending on the requirement of the body, the pneumotaxic center can reduce the duration of inspiration. So when the inspiration time is cut down, then the rate of respiration increases. So depending on the situation and requirement of the body, pneumotaxic center can reduce the duration of inspiration and increases the rate of respiration. These are the two important functions of pneumotaxic center. The third one is chemosensory area. The chemosensory area is present adjacent to the respiratory rhythmic center. Where is this respiratory rhythmic center present? In the medulla oblongata. Chemosensory area is present adjacent to RRC means its location also in the medulla oblongata. And what is the duty of chemosensory area? The chemosensory area is sensitive to carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions. Whenever carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions are high in the blood that is supplied to the brain, like through carotid arteries, that situation will be detected by the chemosensory area because it is sensitive to those components. Once it recognizes, then it will pass on the information to the respiratory rhythmic center and asking the respiratory rhythmic center to take necessary steps for sending this excess CO2 to out for taking oxygen in. So this is regarding chemosensory area. Of course, we have some peripheral receptors which are sensitive to carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions. The oxygenated blood pumped by the left ventricle into a blood vessel called aortic arch. The walls of aortic arch are having receptors that are sensitive to CO2 and H+. Even the wall of carotid arteries are having receptors that are sensitive to CO2 and H+. If they recognize CO2 and H+, they will also can pass on the information to RRC and will ask the RRC to take appropriate steps to send out this CO2 and H+ ions to maintain the pH balance of the blood, because if more H+ is there in the blood, that causes the lower pH in blood, which disturbs the metabolism. In this entire regulation of breathing mechanism, I said there are receptors that are sensitive to CO2. That is the reason why we can say in the regulation of respiration, the role of carbon dioxide is significant. The role of oxygen is quite insignificant. Suppose there is a question like, when you hold your breath, which of the following conditions can cause urge for breathing? The perfect answer is, when you hold your breath, the increased levels of carbon dioxide in the blood is the important factor that causes the urge for breathing, because we have receptors to recognize their levels. This is regulation of breathing. Next one is disorders of respiratory system, the last topic in the breathing and exchange of gases. Regarding the disorders of respiratory system, the first one is asthma. Asthma is a difficulty in breathing causing wheezing sound due to inflammation of bronchi and bronchioles. Inflammation means swelling of the cells inside the bronchi and bronchioles, narrowing the passage, air passage in the bronchi and bronchioles. But this inflammation is caused by the release of histamine. Histamine is released by the mast cells. So we can say asthma is a kind of allergic attack. Next, emphysema. Emphysema is a chronic disorder. It will not develop in a single day or 1 or 2 weeks. It is a chronic disorder, long-term disorder, in which alveolar walls are damaged, due to which respiratory surface area is decreased, causing severe breathing issue. But who is responsible for this kind of nature? That means, who is responsible for damage of alveoli, decreasing the respiratory surface area? Cigarette smoking is the prime cause for emphysema. It will damage the alveolar walls. When alveolar walls are damaged, that decreases the surface area for exchange of gases, causing severe breathing issues. Next one is occupational disorders. In certain industries, especially those involving grinding or stone breaking, so much dust is produced. Our defense mechanism cannot cope up with that. So that the people may develop some specific disorders called occupational disorders. What happens in this? So the dust will go to the alveoli, will cause inflammation of the lungs, and will cause fibrosis of lungs, proliferation of fibrous tissue. You know what happens when fibrous tissue is proliferated? That reduces the elasticity of the lungs, finally reduces the exchange of gases, causing severe breathing issues. So inflammation and fibrosis of lungs are the important characteristics, symptoms related to the occupational disorders when we are exposed to unwanted dust and other components. Some of the occupational disorders includes asbestosis, like exposed to the asbestos cement kind of dust, silicosis, exposed to the sand kind of dust, silica, siderosis, iron industries. Anthracosis is also called black lung disease. In coal mines, when we expose to the fine black dust of carbon, that may cause the anthracosis. With this, the breathing and exchange of gases is completed. The topics that I have discussed so far, like respiratory organs, human respiratory system, events of respiration, mechanism of breathing, in that inspiration, expiration and volumes and capacities, exchange of gases like pulmonary exchange and systemic exchange. Next, transport of gases, regulation of breathing, and finally disorders of the respiratory system. Thank you.